Now to the other big news this week. Washington got back to work. A modest budget compromise announced by Congressman Paul Ryan and Senator Patty Murray brought Republicans and Democrats together. Imagine that. But could it tear apart the GOP? Tea Party activists blasted the deal, and Speaker of the House John Boehner fired back. The Powerhouse Roundtable is ready to take it on. But first, here's ABC's Jeff Zeleny.
Are you kidding me?
The look on his face said it all. Speaker John Boehner finally fed up with the Tea Party.
There just comes to a point when some people step over the line.
Is this an example of you finally saying no to the Tea Party?
I came here to cut the size of government. That's exactly what this bill does. You know, when you criticize something and you have no idea what you're criticizing, it undermines your credibility.
The rare bipartisan budget deal that prevents another government shutdown suddenly became a line in the sand for establishment Republicans like Boehner and Paul Ryan, who've been tiptoeing around conservative activists for 3 years.
What lessons have Republicans learned from the last 2 months?
I don't think you get anything out of a government shutdown. The point is, we're not getting everything we want because Barack Obama's president.
The right responded with a firestorm of criticism.
Republican Party is absorbed with eliminating any conservative influence.
The Speaker's being absurd. This deal increases spending. This deal increases taxes, and that's bad for the country.
I think John Boehner is one of the prime examples of worthless Republicans.
And some Republicans eyeing their own presidential aspirations piled on.
A compromise also has to be a solution. It can't just be a compromise for the sake of saying, I came to agreement on something.
A new front in a simmering civil war where the Republican establishment is firing back. For this week, Jeff Zeleny, ABC News, Capitol Hill.
All right, let's bring in the roundtable. Former Speaker of the House Newt Gingrich, co-host of CNN's Crossfire, Robert Reich, the former Labor Secretary, and star of the documentary Inequality for All, out on DVD next month, Republican strategist Ana Navarro from CNN, and ABC's own Cokie Roberts. So, Speaker Gingrich, the headline here, there won't be a shutdown for at least 2 years. The Republican Party learned its lesson?
I have no idea. I think it's clear that they didn't work, and in that sense, they learned a lesson. I think this is mediocre policy and brilliant politics.
On whose part?
On the Republican part. I mean, it doesn't get them what they want in policy terms, but it strips away the danger that people will notice anything but Obamacare. And the longer the country watches Obamacare, the more likely the Democrats are to lose the Senate. And from the Republican standpoint, if you could get to January 15 and have 8 or 9 new senators and, say, 20 more House members, that gives you enormously more leverage for shaping 16.
So if you were Speaker of the House, would you have done what Boehner did here?
If I were a very junior member, I would have complained mightily, and if I were the Speaker, I would have rammed it through.
There's a difference. And you were there.
I was there. I did both, actually.
You remember when John Boehner was the junior member who was fighting you.
John was actually conference chair. But I also remember late in my career, I blew up exactly like he did. And I think sometimes it's healthy. I think they had worked very hard to get to this point. They were very battered by the shutdown. And I think he just thought, why not?
I like angry, fed up John Boehner a lot more than I like crying John Boehner. I think he's right to be fed up. He tried for 2 weeks to accommodate this very right-wing faction of the party, and they just could not be accommodated. The guy has had it.
But and I got to ask you, I mean, why did it take 2 years? I mean, shouldn't he have done this a long time ago? I mean, he's felt this way for 2 years.
John, I can tell you what
I think it's called an evolution, John. I think in politics we call it an evolution.
No, there's not an evolution here. What happened was the business community, corporations, Wall Street, they decided that the mavericks, the Tea Parties, are just too dangerous. The shutdown scared them, but also the default, the prospect of a default on the full faith and credit of the United States scared them. And a lot of corporations said to the Chamber of Commerce and a lot of business groups, we've got to get into Republican primaries and we've got to prevent the Tea Parties from intimidating, the Tea Party groups from intimidating the rest of the Republicans. And that is the big change that has happened. It's not courage, it's money.
The other big change
But the money's been against this for a long
No, not the money in the primaries.
It's the 10% approval rating of Congress. When you've got,
That's also been around.
Well, but it is now so poisoned, and so to have him say, "Look, it's worse for us to be in this position." You had what you called the perfectionist caucus, Mr. Speaker, the same exact sort of thing. And finally, you get to the point where you understand that the politics are that you need to get reelected as a Republican House of Representatives, and that's going to be hard when people are furious with
Look,
it.
John, the game changer here was the shutdown.
Right.
The Tea Party, the naysayers, they really overplayed their hand in the shutdown, and in the process, they strengthened John Boehner's hand. And I think that's what we're seeing now, because it's not only John Boehner who got fed up. It's a lot of other Republicans who got fed up and worried by seeing what was a political destruction of the Republican Party and a distraction.
But it's not over, by the way.
Mr. Speaker,
Second, guys. The other giant game changer was Obamacare. If you're a semi-rational Republican and you are sitting around, it's one thing to say, "Gee, that didn't work." It's another thing to have this gigantic Christmas gift show up on your doorstep with a little note that says, "Please don't screw this up,"
which they managed to do in October.
Right. So they're able to walk around now and just say to each other, let's make sure the news media is covering the collapse of Obamacare, not covering a fight in the Republican Party.
But also before we celebrate this budget deal, which is really marginal, it shows how low our expectations have become that we think this is such a great breakout of bipartisanship. This is almost nothing. And the real shameful aspect of it is that 1 and a third million people are not going to be getting unemployment benefits on December 28th because Congress did not, in this budget agreement, see fit to extend unemployment.
And frankly,
benefits.
the Democrats didn't really fight for it.
No,
and the Democrats should have fought harder.
The White House
because they're happy to see the Republicans fighting each other over what's in the budget deal. There's a lot of Democrats who feel just like Robert does.
But
I want to pick up Robert's point, though, about just how modest this thing is. We heard Speaker of the House Gingrich say that if you're for deficit reduction, you're for this. Take a look at this. Speaker Boehner, the other one. Look at this. So $85 billion in deficit reduction out of $6.3 trillion in added deficits over the next 10 years. This was about 1%.
The brilliant thing about this budget is you can look at it and make any argument you want. You can't tell whether it's deficit reduction. You can't tell whether it's more spending. Anybody can see in it what they want, and that is exactly the point.
But what it does, look, we know what it does. It keeps the government going. It keeps us away from another crisis. And it does put some money back into some domestic programs that were really screaming, particularly scientific research.
And defense.
Defense. So you have a lot of...
Yes, but it does nothing for there's almost nothing for the poor. There's almost nothing.
True.
Title I, elementary, secondary education, Head Start,
and we
all of the programs
and we still
that
have
this
a farm
country,
bill with cutting food
given the
stamps.
widening gap that we're going to be hopefully talking about later in this program, this budget does not one iota.
Well, I want to ask, because for all the talk about how Republicans caved and all the anger from the right, the White House, the president has said for a long time, any approach to deficit reduction must be balanced, meaning there has to be tax increases on the wealthy as well as cuts. There are no tax increases in the wealthy here. Did the White House wave the white flag on that issue?
I think the White House wanted some sort of agreement to go to the end of the year and say, oh, well, bipartisanship is back. And maybe you can build on this little scrap of bipartisanship for some larger
I mean, that's
purposes.
what you're hearing out of the White House. You're hearing out of the White House that he says, okay, now I've got this. Now I can talk about immigration. Now I can talk about income inequality. I can get to those other issues.
On this point, Speaker Gingrich, on the conventional wisdom on immigration was if you don't get it done this year, it's not going to happen because you're not going to pass it in an election year. But isn't it the reverse true? That if you wait until after the Republican primaries?
It's not even a question of the primaries. I think the House Republicans will probably move 5 or 6 separate smaller bills, adding up to a large change. I think the president's indicated already that he would accept that kind of approach. And I think they'll do that in the spring. I mean, I think Chairman Goodlatte wants to move something. And I don't...
So we're going to have comprehensive immigration reform, including a path to citizenship this year?
I didn't say that.
There is no way.
Very substantial.
It is actually possible.
There's no way.
It's going to be a different. What comes out of the House is going to be a different bill than what the Senate passed. Yeah. But most definitely, I think the window for immigration reform reopens late spring, early summer. It doesn't get done then, it doesn't get done. But a very good sign happened just 10 days ago when John Boehner hired as his new immigration staffer a woman named Rebecca Talent, who was the person who was John McCain's right hand on immigration. It's unfinished
Somebody
business
from the
for her.
Bipartisan Policy Center whose entire work has been on immigration.
Who came in particularly to help draft a House project, to help draft something that can pass political muster and policy.
It can be like the compromise of 1850, where
problem.
different people vote for different parts of it, and then you get the whole thing through.
So you think it's going to happen?
I think it's possible.
But you don't.
I do not think it's going to happen because Republicans do not want to vote on anything that can be interpreted by the Republican base as pro-immigrant or creating any kind of a way for immigrants to come in here who are now undocumented.
Look, that's true for some Republicans, but I think there's enough Republicans that are going to support something. Because a lot of people want to get it done. A lot of people want to get it off the to-do list. And a lot of people have a national vision and understand it's important for the existence and growth of the Republican Party in the future to get this done.
Can I offer a note of, I hope not undue cynicism? You know, a do-nothing Congress is not necessarily bad for the Republican Party. A Congress that inspires cynicism among the public about the capacity of government to do anything is not necessarily antithetical to what Republicans have been saying all along about government.
Unless you
Speaker
own
Boehner
one house.
has said, judge
Unless
us
you
not
own
by
one
how many
house.
laws we pass, but by how many we repeal.
But I understand Robert's dream of a Republican Party sufficiently stupid that beating it's easy.
Dream.
But I would just suggest to you that what happened in New Jersey is really, really important. I mean, Christie got 50% of the Latino vote. And that says to a lot of Republicans that if you, in fact, are willing to lean forward, if you're willing to go out and compete, if you're willing to pass systematic immigration reform, you might have a very different 2016 than Democratic strategists expect.
But no, what's the real possibility of Christie getting the Republican
It's not about him being a
nomination?
nominee. It's about a Republican Party which is competitive in Univision, competitive in Telemundo, capable of having an argument.
And you have to have an immigration bill
I got
for
to
that
tell you,
to
I
happen.
see a path for a Chris Christie or a Jeb Bush, because if you've got 5 people on the right dividing up that vote, then there is a path for a Christie or a Jeb. Not if they both run.
All right, we're going to have time enough to talk about the 2016 primary, but I want to turn to the other major political development this week, which was PolitiFact awarded their Lie of the Year. This is not exactly an award you want to win, but it went to President Obama for his statement. If you like your health care plan, you can keep it. Dubious distinction. The first ever Lie of the Year went to Sarah Palin for talking about death panels. What do you make it? Is this justified?
Well, justified, not justified. What the president wanted to talk about this week was the fact that there are 360,000 enrollees in November, new enrollees in November at the on healthcare.com. And in fact, he can't talk about that. I mean, the attacks on Obamacare, on the Affordable Care Act, have been absolutely relentless. It was a terrible mistake for him to say what he did. But after a while, you've got to look at the fact that we have one of the most important reforms of the healthcare system of the United States ever enacted.
Is it going to be seen that way a year from now?
I think it is, because at the present rate of enrollment, we're going to have over 1 million people enrolled by January, and people are going to stop complaining.
Unless a year from now, people start seeing their employers dropping their health insurance. And then you'll start to have a whole nother wave of reaction against it.
But, Jonathan, you have to put this in context. Over 5 million people have lost their insurance because of Obamacare. Now we have 350,000 who have found insurance. That's a pretty bad exchange rate. In January, you're going to see ads on TV of attorneys saying, if you went to the hospital and found you weren't insured and you need to sue somebody, call me for a free consultation.
And you're going to be in the ads. You're going to be providing the
There
ads.
are thousands of people who are going to show up in the hospital and find out that they don't have the insurance coverage they thought they had. Then you're going to have the issue of the fact you can't go to the cancer specialist you want, because the government has approved very narrow networks. I mean, all these compounding things are going to go on all next year.
But all of that's been true in insurance policies already. I mean, the notion that you could go to any doctor you wanted to.
But now the president's going to own a lot of this.
Listen, and a lot of it is self-inflicted injuries. The bottom line is they launched a program that was not ready for prime time. They have been inaccurate, untruthful about a lot of the problems that have developed as a result of that. And they knew a lot of this and pretended they didn't and just stubbornly plowed on.